Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. Greetings from International House, Toruń. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. I'm Glenn Stanish. I'm the Director of Studies here at IH Toruń, and I will be your host for the next 13 hours. That's correct, 13 hours. It is going to be a marathon of CPD for everybody. Now, the idea is, of course, I don't expect you to be glued to your screens for 13 hours, okay? Only Muggins here will be doing that, okay? So the idea is that with that link, the Zoom link you have, you can be coming and going throughout the day, okay? In terms of things you need to worry about, basically, in order to communicate, you can chat in the chat box. If you would like to ask a question to the presenters, then there is the option of the Q&A feature as well. And if either myself or one of the presenters requests you to unmute your microphone, we can arrange that if you would like to talk to the presenters if time permitting. Okay, so I want you to sit back, relax, and hopefully enjoy today's event. Okay, we've got a lot planned. Okay, in literally about a minute's time, we're going to be having Jill Hadfield live from New Zealand. Yes, it's basically 8:30 in the evening over there, and then at 9:30 our time, an hour later, we will be having Carol Reed, and then an hour after that, it will be Andrew Walkley. So they're the three presenters in the next few hours. So we're going to start off with Jill Hadfield, then Carol Reed, and then Andrew Walkley. Okay, so let me introduce everybody to Jill Hadfield. Just sort out Jill's camera. Jill, are you able to turn your camera on? Jill, I think you can turn your camera on now if you would like to unmute yourself as well. Here she is. Hello, Jill. Good evening, Jill.
Hi, New Zealand. Good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you too. How is New Zealand today?
Oh, you can probably hear some noisy fireworks. As you said, it's 8:30 in the evening here, so
what's the reason for celebrating? Is there something happening today, or?
It's leftover Guy Fawkes.
Okay, so you celebrate Guy Fawkes in New Zealand just like we do in the UK as well. I should know that because I was born in New Zealand. Shows how long I've been away from that country. Anyway, so yeah. So Jill Hadfield obviously is very well known in the world of English language teaching. She has been a teacher and a teacher trainer in many countries, including China, Tibet, that sounds fascinating, Madagascar, and of course, Jill has written many books. One of my very first books I ever used as a teacher was Communication Games, which I'm a big fan of. I still am a big fan of, and I remember using, well, I still use Elementary, My Dear Watson. That's a great game for practicing modals of speculation. And of course, here is one of your books written by your husband, Charles. Yes. So the floor is yours, Jill. Over to you.
Great. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you tonight. And thanks so much to Glenn for organising such a wonderful event, an all-day event. As he said, it's 8:30 in the evening here. So this is the voice of the future, everyone. I'll just put up the share screen and then I'll begin. Okay. Here we go. And I need to just do the slideshow. Start. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. I'll be talking for a bit at the beginning, just an introduction. And then I'll be presenting various practical activities that I hope you'll find useful. And I'll actually sort of do some of them with you via the chat box so you can see how they work. But here we go. Okay, I'm going to talk about online interactive activities. So first of all, I'd just like to consider that word interaction because it's changed in meaning over the years. So if you just look at this definition from the Oxford Dictionary online, and sorry Cambridge, it's the Oxford Dictionary. Interactive, first of all, meant two people influencing or having an effect on each other. And this is the meaning that we normally talk about in classroom usage, as in interactive activities like information gap, role play, where two people in your class or pairs or groups are communicating with each other. But there's been a recent different use of the word, which is comes from EdTech, allowing a two-way flow of information between a computer and a computer user, responding to a user's input. So it's changed. So the first definition is between human and human, and the second definition is between human and machine. Here are some examples. So I'd just like to briefly give you a quotation about the rise of interactive in education and education technology, because it's very much a buzzword in EdTech. And I'll just read you this quotation from an article from Haugsback and Nordfeller, two Norwegian scholars. They say, interactivity was obviously quite useful for marketing the new technology. The term had no commonly accepted meaning or definitions, but a whole range of positive connotations made it acceptable for most people. One of the prominent ideas was interactive technology, establishing and supporting quite new ways of learning, in contrast to the established ones. Interactive technology should open up student activity, user control, and dialogue. The focus was put on learning rather than teaching. The concepts of teaching and learning were introduced as a dichotomy, to a large extent based on quite simple stereotypes of the two phenomena. Teaching as something bad we had to get rid of, and learning as something good we have to promote. So to me, this suggests that in technology, interactivity takes place between human and machine rather than human and human. It also suggests, rather disturbingly to me, that tech marketing promotes the simplistic idea that educational technology equates with learning, which involves human to machine interaction and is good, whereas the traditional face-to-face classroom equates with teaching, which involves lecture-style transmission, teacher to student, and is bad. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel rather insulted by that implication in the use of interactivity in EdTech writing. Anyway, when we were writing the book that this talk is based on, Lindsay and I coined two terms. Weak interaction, which refers to the interaction between human and machine, and strong interaction, which refers to the interaction between human and human. And it's strong interaction that I want to focus on in this presentation. So let's look a bit about what you get in interactivity, weak interaction between human and machine. So this is just a screenshot from a language learning app, of which there are several. You could do things like translate, you get a progress check, you get feedback on whether you're right or wrong. What you often also get is standard activities where you type something into a blank, or you, I'll just see if I can move the screen a bit, or move the people a bit so that maybe you can see, where you drag and drop answers into the right boxes. You see a lot of this, what we call weak interaction, in apps all over the internet, but tools that facilitate strong interaction are often underused. For example, discussion forums or chat rooms. So that's what this presentation is going to focus on. So I'm going to look first of all at interaction tools. And first of all, the first thing you'd have to do is choose a platform. So we're thinking here of platforms like Edmodo, Moodle, though I have reservations about how easy Moodle is for people to use. Facebook, a private closed group on Facebook, WhatsApp and other, Lafora we also tried. So here are some considerations that you might take into account when you're choosing a platform. So how easy will it be for students to access the platform? When we were trialing the book, we tried some platforms that students found quite hard to get into. And a related question is, how familiar are students with the platform already? So if they're familiar with it, it's something they already use, then your job is minimized and they find it very easy. Another one is, how easy is it to find new and unread messages? So for example, we use Moodle a lot at my previous job, and it's quite hard to find when somebody posts something new. It kind of goes into a thread and gets a bit hidden. I think there are newer versions of Moodle where it's easier now. Is it easy and intuitive to post messages to the group? And here's a very crucial one. Is it easy to post private messages to each other? If you can post private messages within the platform, something like Messenger or even email, I suppose, it opens up a whole load of possibilities for pair work and information gap. And we'll look at how to use these when I demonstrate some practical activities a bit later. Just running through the rest, can you create multiple topics? How easy is it to start and differentiate different topics? Here's a crucial one. Is it possible and easy to upload images and video? With a couple of the platforms we tried out, the trial students we were working with found it very difficult to upload an image. And images are important because it opens up a whole lot of possible activities. Either the teacher posts an image or the students post an image, and it opens up a lot of communication activities. So just quickly finishing, is it possible to pin a topic or forum to the top of the page so that everybody can see the subject at the top? Is it possible to view a discussion in a threaded manner, or is it linear? So can you do you always see it in a linear way in the time frame that things came in, or can you thread it according to topics? Can learners edit or delete their posts if they think better later, or either want to delete or change their wording? And is there, probably less important, an optional like button for posts? So those are all things that you could bear in mind when choosing a platform for students to work with each other. I'll just come on now to the last bit of the theoretical considerations before I get on to the practical activities. These are some considerations to be borne in mind about designing interactive tasks online. So here are 10 principles for interactive tasks. I'll just sort of focus on the most important, really. They're between human and human, not human and machine. They can involve voice or text. So it could be either something like Edmodo, Facebook, or something like Skype or Zoom, or a messenger app where people can talk to each other. They can be synchronous, i.e. all happening at the same time, as in a Skype conversation or Zoom, or asynchronous, as in a platform like WhatsApp or Edmodo, though those two apps can also be synchronous. So you can choose to have it all happening at the same time or over a period of time. The tasks should have a reason for communication, to share information, opinions, values, or ideas. That goes without saying with the communicative approach. They should have a purpose and have closure in an end point. That means that communication should achieve something like the solution to a puzzle or the creation of a text. I think that communicative activities in class, face-to-face, are actually more satisfying if they end in an end point, because the students feel they've achieved something, they've done something with the language, rather than having an open-ended discussion which can meander on till the teacher decides to call an end to it. But I think it's even more important online, because if you have closure and end point, the activity ends without the teacher having to step in and end it. So it's a natural end to the activity. They should involve two-way participation. Members should take account of others' contributions and contribute themselves, and they should involve all members of the group. And then the topics obviously should be interesting and motivating, and there should be a range of interaction types, a range of task types and learner task preferences, both for variety and suiting the kind of tasks that learners feel they learn best from. So I'm coming on now to a selection of practical classroom materials, well, not classroom, online materials, that I hope you'll find useful, directly useful for your own teaching. I'd first like to define 5 types of interactive task. Factual tasks involve finding and sharing information on a factual topic. Typical activities might be a quiz or a guessing game. Personal interactive tasks are ones that we're very familiar with from course books and teachers' resource books. They involve exchange of personal information about your background, your likes, your dislikes, etc. Personal anecdotes, things that happen to you, preferences and values, etc. Fanciful interactive tasks involve entering into an imaginary situation, sometimes taking on a role, having a role play, some kind of fantastical, unreal situation, interacting perhaps to share a puzzle or solve information. Critical interactive tasks involve an exchange of opinions on a topic, typically a discussion or debate. And finally, creative tasks involve interaction to create a communal poem, story, or other product, for example, an advert. So students interact in order to create a piece of writing or a dialogue. Okay, so here are some examples. And this is where I'll begin to ask you to interact using the chat box. Not for everyone, but for some of them. So we'll look first at factual activities. And we'll begin with one very, very simple one called Where in the World Am I? So the teacher posts a picture of a place. And the challenge to the students is, imagine I took this photo, where in the world am I? They have to guess where you are, and you have a maximum of 25 questions, and you can only ask yes, no questions. So not are you in Europe or Africa, but are you in Europe? Okay, choose your questions carefully. You only have 25. When you think you know where it is, you can begin to guess. Okay, so it's a very good idea when you're setting up an activity like this to include some examples of possible language that the students could use to give them some inspiration and something to go on. I'll just try and get the chat box up and then I'll ask you a question. Yeah, okay, to all panelists. So I'm going to ask you the question. Oh, somebody's already asked, are you in Europe? Yes, I am. Can you type any more messages, anybody? Are you east of Germany? Wait a sec. No, I'm west of Germany. Are you in North Africa? No, I'm not. I am in Spain. Yes. Are you on the coast? Actually, I'm not quite sure, but very near. Are you somewhere cold? I'm not somewhere cold. I'm not in a capital city. I'm not on an island, and I'm not very close to Barcelona. It is warm there. Vigo is in Portugal, isn't it? No, I'm in Spain. I'm not in Granada, but not too far. Possibly in Alicante, I'm not quite sure. It's southern Spain, though, I'll tell you that. Not in Seville, near Seville. Yep. Okay, I think you got the idea. It's not Granada, it's not Cordova, it's not Valencia. It's actually the town that Lindsay, who's my co-author, happens to live in, and it's called Eiche. E-I-C-H-E, and it's in southern Spain. Okay, I'll just close the chat box and go on. So that's a very, very simple guessing game activity, and you can use it with all sorts of things. I'm sure you've used it many times in class, but a good way to use it is through using an image, which is why it's so important when choosing your platform to have a platform where it's very easy to upload images. Going on with Factual, here's a more complicated activity we've called it sports shorts. So the stimulus is the teacher messages everybody, and this is where private message is very important. So if you have a private message facility, message each student in your class a different sport, netball, hockey, football, and you give them a task. They have to write 3 rules for the sport. This typically would come after a lesson where you taught modals like must and mustn't and can't. But they mustn't say what the sport is. They write their 3 rules in a single post. Here it says, as an example, remember the language we studied for football rules. So it's assuming this activity for practice comes perhaps for homework after a face-to-face lesson where they've learned language for rules. Task 2 is interaction. Once they've posted their rules, they read other people's rules and try to guess the sport. Then they choose 2 different sport posts and guess the sport. And they look at what people wrote on their post. Did they guess correctly? And they tell them if they were right or wrong. And then the final task is creation. Once they've guessed each other's sports and they've got a kind of body of language with must, mustn't, can't, etc., can, they create a sport. They choose rules from different sports and make a new sport with these rules and give the sport a name. For example, foot tennis. You can imagine some of the rules for that. I should imagine it would probably involve kicking a ball across a net instead of into a net. Then they look at the other posts and decide which one they'd like to play. And if you notice at the end of each task, there's a deadline. I think it's very important if you're doing something asynchronously to give a deadline so that the activity doesn't lose momentum. So these 2 activities fall into an interaction pattern that I've called Confetti. So the teacher posts a stimulus and the students reply. So think of the stimulus being the bride and groom come out of the registry office or the church or wherever, and everybody throws confetti at them. So it's the stimulus and then everybody replies chaotically and randomly. The variation, which is sports shorts, excuse me, I'll just have a glass of water. The teacher posts a stimulus, the students reply, then they read and interact, and then they create something. So it's possible to use the same interaction pattern and go on a couple of stages. Okay, those were 2 factual activities. Let's look at a couple of personal ones. And this is using the same sort of confetti idea. So food is of interest to everybody. Just look at typical Facebook posts. So the teacher posts a picture of some food, some interesting food that they had, perhaps on holiday, perhaps recently, maybe their favorite dish, and asks the students to ask questions. So they could ask questions like, why is it green? Or which country does it come from? Or what are those funny pancakes at the bottom? And the teacher replies. Then, task 4, interaction. I'll just move the pictures over a little bit. The teacher says, here is a list of questions that you asked. I've corrected the language. So when you're doing interaction online, very often you have an opportunity to intervene between 2 tasks and do a kind of correction language amendment activity, which will actually help the students for the next section of the activity. And you don't always have that so well. I'll come on to correction at the end of the talk. But what's the good thing about something like a platform like Edmodo or Facebook is that you can see everybody's comments and what they said in a linear fashion. And you can then, that's an invaluable opportunity for giving them feedback. So at this point, the teacher gives them some correct models of sentences and then starts the next task. The students have to do the same thing, post a picture of food, and then everybody has to ask questions. So again, the same confetti model of interaction. Here's one called This or That. And maybe I'll do this with the chat box. So the teacher posts, the teacher posts a task. They say two things. So traveling by bus or traveling by train. And the students write, traveling by train, absolutely. Or I prefer traveling by bus, or I'd rather travel by bus, or just train or bus. If you don't like traveling by train, or you don't like traveling by bus, you can write neither. Okay. So we'll try this with Chatbook. I will post, and this time I'll write it in. Okay. Write your answers. Oh, sorry, I've got two old panelists. I'll do it again, sorry, that only went to the panelists. Okay, now we're getting some more. The thing is, perhaps we should specify before it, you will have taught some language before something like this, which is absolutely, or I prefer, or I'd rather. So somebody's now put tea or coffee. So should we try that? But say a little bit more than just tea or coffee. Like I like tea. I could say I like I can't stand either of these, great. Great. Okay, so depending on the level of your students, you can have some really rich exchanges. At an elementary level, you could just have I prefer or I like better. But some of the things you're putting in at the moment, my morning beauty coffee is a must, yeah. I love green tea and would prefer it over coffee. So you can use an activity like this at many different levels with corresponding richness of language. Okay, great, thanks. So again, that's another confetti activity. Okay, that's the end of the personal ones. If we come on now to some fanciful activities. And from now on, the activities are going to get a little bit more complicated. So far, they've been very simple activities. They're going to get a little bit more complex. So we'll try this one as well. Here's one fanciful one called Almost Superpower. So one person posts a superpower they'd like to have. For example, I can fly. The next person has to make a condition beginning with, but you, for example, but you can only fly 1 meter off the ground. Maybe you'd like to try responding first of all to I can fly, and then I'll put another one up for you to do. Okay, so let me get into the chat box. So I can fly. Can you try? But you're scared of heights. Oh, lovely, but backwards, that's great. Great. Okay, I'll try another one to see how we go. I can read people's thoughts. See if you can do any with those. Okay, so the first person, these are brilliant, great. The first person who replied was Sandy from IH. Sandy, could you now, because you were the first person to reply, could you type a new superpower and people can respond to that? Sandy? I can swim really fast, says Sandy. So try and butt you. Oh, lovely. Only when there's sharks chasing me, brilliant. Great. Oh, that's lovely. Great. Well done, everybody. That's really, really good, rich, funny replies. Okay. Okay, so I call that interaction pattern 2. I've christened Pass the Parcel. So the teacher posts a stimulus, student 1 replies and posts the next stimulus. So we have quite a lot of people here. I'm not quite sure how many, but more than in a usual class. You can do an interaction pattern activity like this in 2 ways. You can actually do it in the rather more chaotic way I did, which was just ask everybody to reply. Or you can do it in a really ordered way. You can give students a number. And so the teacher posts the stimulus, I can fly. Student 1 replies, but you can only fly 1 meter off the ground, and post the next stimulus. It's a bit like a chain drill, or it's like pass the parcel. Student 1 gets the parcel from the teacher, replies to it, or takes off the wrapping paper and passes it to the next student. So you can do it in that very ordered way if you like, or you can do it in the more chaotic, random way that I did. The ordered way means there's more control and everybody has to reply, whereas in the more chaotic way, there may be some students who don't reply at all. But the more chaotic way seems to be that the students will practice more language or make more utterances or contributions. Okay, here's a more complicated, I told you we were going to get more complicated and probably up a couple of levels, a murder mystery. Which actually is a bit like the elementary My Dear Watson that Glenn referred to right at the beginning in the introduction. So it begins with a scenario. The murder happened in the house of Paul and Marianne. Basically, the scenario identifies where the murder happened, who got killed, how, what time, and who was there, who are the suspects. You post this to everybody, and then you send each student a numbered clue. So student 1 gets clue 1, student 2 gets clue 2, etc. And you make it clear that student with a clue number 1 should begin. So here's an example, and again, it's for practicing modals of deduction. So participants should write deductions on the clue. So here's an example. Clue 1, the window was open. So possible posts are the murderer might have got in through the window, or he might have come in through the door and left by the window. As part of writing the book, at one point, Scott Thornbury, who was the series editor, wanted us to try out some of the more complicated activities like this with students. And I got a few Auckland teachers to try it out. And here was, I was a sort of spy in the camp. I could see what they wrote, but I didn't enter into the activity. So I thought you'd like to see what real students actually contributed when they did this murder mystery. Clue number 1, posted by student 1, was there were no fingerprints on the knife. Another student said, oh, then the murderer might have worn gloves. And student 3 said, oh, maybe the murderer was an alien who doesn't have fingerprints. I just thought that was lovely. You know, what imagination. So I call this poker. Students take number turns to post a stimulus and the others react. So it's like laying down a card in poker and reacting to it. Coming on now to critical interaction. Critical interactions in class are very often discussions or open-ended discussions. I'd like to say an open-ended discussion isn't always a good idea on a platform like Edmodo, Facebook, WhatsApp. Students may not, there may be passenger students who don't interact at all or don't contribute. And B, an open-ended discussion can just go on until the teacher decides arbitrarily it's time to end it or the students run out of things to say. So if you're going to have a critical discussion, a critical interaction activity on an online platform, it's a good idea to structure it so that everybody has to contribute and there's an end point to it. So I'll just show you a couple of these. This is called Yes But, and we're getting more complicated because this involves putting students in two groups and then regrouping them. And for both of these, you need the private message facility and perhaps a facility for making subgroups or small groups. Breakout rooms on Zoom spring to mind if you're doing it synchronously. But say on Facebook, you could make two subgroups, two small closed private groups to begin with, and then get students together in private message. So first of all, you tell them they're going to discuss advantages and disadvantages of solutions to climate change. And you give them a reading list, an online reading list. Or if you're teaching in a combination face-to-face and online, you can give them some reading in class to take away with them. You put the whole class in two groups. Group A, the advantages group, and Group B, the disadvantages group. Group A have to read the material and list all the advantages of the solutions to climate change. And Group B have to read the same material and list the disadvantages and give them a deadline, make your list by. Task 2, interaction. When they've done the reading and they've made their lists, they interact in Group A or Group B to share the arguments that they've read. Task 3, you regroup them into pairs. And this would probably have to be done by private message or video chat, or possibly small breakout rooms in Zoom. So the pairs are A, student A was from the advantages group and student B is from the disadvantages group. So student A begins and says a recommendation for a solution, talking about the advantages. For example, to halt climate change, we should. Student B replies beginning, yes, but. Yes, but if we did that, we would. And then student A replies again, yes, but, with an argument refuting student B's. And the person who continue with the yes, buts the longest is the winner. Okay, so it is very structured so that everybody contributes. And it's also structured so that there's an end point. There's a winner with the yes, buts, and also a deadline for finishing it. So we call that breakout. Students work in two closed groups, A and B, and then students regroup into pairs, an A and a B for follow-up. Here's another critical discussion called Create a Constitution. You have to imagine a country like Venice, Zambia, and everybody has to post a rule for the Constitution. For example, it's illegal to keep dogs, and post 3 rules by Friday, 3 laws by Friday. Then, after Friday has come and gone, we read each other's laws and vote for any that they like. Any law getting 3 votes is passed and becomes part of the Constitution. You can discuss the laws, you can try to get votes, you can canvass the votes, and you can pass laws that undo previous laws. The current situation in the US is springing to mind at the moment. So it's fairly chaotic. You, like politics, you canvass, you try to get your laws passed no matter what, and you try to undermine other people's laws. So quite a chaotic, less structured activity, but great fun to do. So we call that Postal Ballot. students post, then they read and vote, then they discuss and reach a consensus. And finally, the last section, we come to creative activities, where students actually use their creativity to make a product, a verbal product. So when we first came to New Zealand, I was fascinated by the number plates, because lots of people, there seem to be no rules at all. You can, I think it's as long as it's 5 or 6 characters, you can have all letters or a combination of letters and numbers. So a lot of people have imaginative number plates. So the one in the picture is fairly obvious, not old, except you wonder how old the person who actually had that number plate was. Were they like 18 or were they 70? And this is the crux of the activity, really, which is that every number plate has a story. So first of all, I'll open the chat box again. And the first activity is some of these number plates might not be immediately apparent to foreign students. So I'll read some of them and then I'll ask you to decode a few of them. So here's the chat. So the first one is obvious, I did it. I mean, again, the question is, what did they do? What were they celebrating? Not old, the question in your mind is, what's the story behind that? What about the next one, beginning with Y? What's the definition? Why be slow? Yes, exactly. What about the next one, beginning with B? Baby, I owe you too. Well done, yes. What a story is there? You know, what was behind Baby, I owe you too? Is that being vindictive? Is it, the mind boggles. Was his? What about the next one, beginning with D? Determined, yes. The next one? Yep, and the final one. Out of work, yes, fine. So do you think out of work, what do you think about the person? Was he actually out of work, unemployed, or had he just retired? So it's the questions of the story behind the number plates that's the basis of this activity. So task 3, asks people to read a story about a number plate. I haven't put it in, but basically it was a number plate I saw one day which said one extreme. So I invented a little story about Mario, who was a very poor street busker, but got recognized by an impresario one day and became a famous opera singer. And he had that number plate to remind him that he went from one extreme to another. So the task is choose a number plate that you think is interesting and write the story behind the plate. Write a short paragraph and post it. And then the interaction is read your classmates' stories, choose one, and maybe give an alternative explanation. So here's one that one of the teachers who was trialing it, one of her students actually wrote this story. When he was young, the number plate, you can see was his. When he was young, Jack met a materialist girl named Maria. Despite all his true love, he did not have enough money to satisfy her. Then the cold-hearted girl left him to live a happy life with a richer man, breaking the heart of the poor young Jack. Emotionally perturbed by this breakup, don't you love that? Jack became obsessed by money and his revenge, so he worked very hard to earn as much money as possible in order to ruin Maria's husband and buy off their belongings. Currently, Jack is laughing diabolically while driving his big black Maserati, decorated by a vanity plate where we can read, was his. Very satisfying. So I called that writers group. So the students create a story, a poem, an advert, etc. Students read, react, and comment. And a final creative activity, collaborative story. Here's one called the Royal Hotel. I put that somewhere else. The Royal Hotel is a 200-year-old institution. Many famous people have visited it, and people say it's the best service in the world. It's home to many dark secrets, and some believe a ghost lives in the basement. You're all going to write a story together. So you invent your character and you write from that character's point of view. You can choose any character that fits into the Royal Hotel setting. You can be a guest, a maid, a receptionist, anything. Just because one person's got a guest, you can also be a guest. You can have several guests, several receptionists. You write in the third person, not I woke up, but Charles woke up and went down for breakfast. You can't write for another person's character, but you can interact with one another. Your first post should introduce your character into the storyline. You don't all have to start in the same place. One of you could be a receptionist who's late. Another could be a guest waking up in her room. You'll eventually meet up. We actually tried this out in a writers group, and my husband Charlie decided to be the ghost, which was very interesting. Don't post more than once in a row. So it's quite chaotic, it's very fluid, the characters interact with each other and the plot just develops organically. It was a very interesting experiment to be part of. So I call that Creative Commons. So students are given rules or a pattern for a collaborative product, for example, a story or a poem, and they work together to produce the product. So that's the end of the practical examples. I'll just talk a little bit about online task design. So in the classroom, face-to-face, they work together or they mingle, and interaction patterns are student to student or student to lots of students, students in a group or a mingle. Groups can't hear what the other groups are saying, and information gaps are easy to set up. But online, students are in a whole class setting. Interaction patterns, as you have seen, can be very varied. Everyone can see what everybody else is saying. Students can respond simultaneously, but see what the other people are saying. Information gaps are more difficult to set up, but they can be done as in Breakout room using private message facility or a closed group facility, or indeed as in Zoom on a breakout room. Some students may not take part or play a lesser role. This is true in a classroom setting too, but it's easier for the teacher to see who's not taking part and to encourage them. The activity might be slow in starting or become sluggish. It's easier to detect this than in a classroom situation, because in a classroom situation, you might be wandering around monitoring one group at a time, and you can't really see if another group's having trouble. So you can intervene or jump in to get the discussion started again. Deadlines are important, as I've said before. Deadlines and closed tasks are important. Feedback and noticing. There's a big difference. In the classroom, you monitor a group and you're listening, and the group might not be making many mistakes or having many problems, but over there, kind of out of sight, out of range, there might be a group that's having a lot of problems, but because you're with that group at that particular time, you can't hear what problems they're having. But online, every contribution is visible, and this is an invaluable opportunity to direct students' attention to opportunities for noticing and picking up on significant problems and misunderstandings. Okay, my last thing was a checklist of questions. I'll go through this fairly rapidly because I want to leave you a few minutes for questions, and I don't want to run into Carol's time. So this is a sequence of choices if you're designing your own activities for online interaction that you have to go through. So the first choice is topic or language practice. You have to choose what kind of activity. Do you want a topic activity? Or do you want a language practice activity? Do you want to have an activity that practices a lexical set, a grammatical structure, or functional language? Then, once you've decided whether you're doing a topic or the language, you have to decide, obviously, on the language or the level. This will just be dictated by the syllabus, I guess, and the level of your students. What would they like best, and what do you think they need most? Then, what activity type? So this is based on the 5 types of critical, personal, fanciful, factual, and creative. What do you think would engage them most? What inspires you most as well? Choice 4. Most activities online will begin with a stimulus. Will you use an image, a question, a sentence, a frame for writing a poem, a written text, an audio or video, a provocative statement, a puzzle, a clue to a puzzle, that's like the murder mystery, a challenge to the students to do something, for example, post a picture. So you have a big choice of stimuli to start the activity off. Choice 5, interaction patterns. And this is a list of the possible interaction patterns. Confetti, pass the parcel, etc. The ones I classified as we went through. And some questions to ask about it. Is the pattern likely to engage students? Does it involve interaction? Will it produce a sufficient number of interactions? Will it involve all the students? And in the case of language practice activities, does it provide sufficient practice of the target language? Once you've sort of roughed out your activity, here come the finer choices about staging and rubrics. Is your activity clearly broken down? Have you checked that they understand how to interact? Have you set a deadline for posting? Are your instructions clear? Is your language adapted for your students' level? Give examples for what contributions are required from students with examples of the language, a model of what to do, and rules and safeguards to ensure even interaction. And can you include positive feedback on a previous stage before introducing instructions to the next stage? If you remember foodies, the teacher commented and gave a list of the correct language. And that's quite a good thing to do at the end of one stage to prepare them for the next stage. But also positive feedback, like that was great, or just encouraging them, saying you liked their contributions. Okay, that comes to the end of the talk. There's a picture of the book. There's the image sources I used. And I'd just like to say thank you for coming. Oh, I was going to do a final activity. I'll just see if there are any questions first, and then I'll do a very last activity to round off. So Q&A. What do I think about Google Classroom, Google Meets as a platform for teaching students? I have to confess, I'm going to answer live. I'm going to confess I haven't actually used Google Classroom, Google Meets. I've used Teams and I've used Zoom. Teams not always very successfully. Does anybody else? Has anybody got more examples of Google Classroom? As I understand it, Google Classroom is an alternative to Zoom, whereas what I've been talking about a bit more in this talk was were platforms where students write in, like Edmodo or WhatsApp or Facebook. But a lot of the activities I've talked about could be used on live video chats or platforms like Zoom as well. Any other questions or any answers? Oh, I just had incredible trouble every time getting into it. And sorry, I have to press answer live. It's probably me. I had terrible trouble every time I used it in different contexts with about 3 or 4 different people of getting into it. But I have heard that quite a lot of people have had a bit of trouble getting into it as well. I'm sure it works perfectly well when you're working with it and when you're used to it. I'm not quite sure. I did everything. It sort of said I'd done everything, and then it suddenly said that I was denied access. I don't know if that was a computer glitch, but it was purely a personal problem. But I have used Zoom a lot. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I'll just do the final activity because it's a nice activity to round off with. Sorry, I'll just close this. Okay, the final activity is blessings. So I'd just like to read you some Irish blessings. I am half Irish, so they appeal to me. May you have bread, milk, a fire. May the wind be always at your back. May your roads lead downhill. I'm never quite sure about that one. May your whiskey flask always be full. May your words become actions. May your words always come true. May the water you drink always taste sweet. May people smile when they meet you. May you be surrounded by goldfinches. That's my favorite. So what I'd like you to do is, sorry, I'll just go back to that. What I'd like you to do is I'll open the chat box, and I'd like us to end the meeting with a blessing for the future for the people who participated. So begin, may you. Nice. Maybe soon get back to our students, yes. Oh, how lovely. May you see the eyes of your students sparkle. Oh, these are really beautiful ones. May you see your students' happy eyes. Yes, may you get through this 13-hour marathon. That's one for Glenn. Lovely. Yes, may we see each other soon. May we overcome the difficult times. Yeah. May you travel. Yes, that's a good one. May your tea never go cold. Lovely. I'll just tell you one. I did this as a sort of PD session when I first started working at the institution I used to work for in New Zealand. So I did it to round off my first PD session, and as it was face-to-face, everybody wrote on a piece of paper, they put it into a hat, and everybody took out a blessing for them from the hat as they left the room. The one I got was, may your board markers always be moist. I loved that. So on that note, I'll just read a couple more of these because they're lovely. May you always be satisfied. May you always stay creative. That's lovely. Well, so it's been lovely talking to you, and it's, I can't say exactly meeting you because I haven't actually seen you, but it's been lovely communicating with you, and thank you for your creative contributions. And it's been a real pleasure being here. And thank you very much, Glenn and Rob, for setting this all up. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Jill. That was wonderful, very, very practical. I do love good practical ideas, and these are lots of ones which teachers can run away with, especially in online lessons, but of course they can be adapted, of course, for face-to-face lessons. So thank you once again, Jill, and enjoy nighttime in New Zealand. Enjoy the fireworks. I haven't heard any for some time, so I think they've finished.
No, I think they're finished now, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the big thing in New Zealand is the rugby. There's a rugby match tonight.
Oh, of course, yes. Is it the All Blacks?
Yes, All Blacks and the Wallabies.
Oh,
the Bledisloe Cup. So the whole of New Zealand is focused on the TV tonight.
Okay. Right, well, thank you once again, Jill. Okay. And hope to meet you in person sometime, okay?
Me too. May we meet in person.
May we meet in person, exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Do you want me to quit or?
Yes, please.